I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So we have a motion to approve the minutes from September, excuse me, the agenda for tonight, September 11th.
Motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Discussion, changes, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes. So we have a motion to approve the minutes from August 21st, our last meeting.
Move that we approve minutes from the August 21st, 21st meeting.
Second.
All right. Any changes to the minutes? Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We have one more minutes to approve.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
One agenda, 1 minute. Okay. We're good. I just printed this.
Good double checking.
Right. All right. Next up on the agenda is school committee chairperson comments. The only comment I'll make real quick, I just want to big thank you to the staff, the teachers, the students, the administrators for persevering through the last week. It sounds like it was exciting times, but hopefully the exciting weather is behind us anyway, so at least the heat, maybe a hurricane's coming, but we'll see. But on, I guess, behalf of all parents, teachers, the school board, so thank you very much for working your way through that. So, let me turn it over to Matt real quick for a statement.
So I'm going to be giving my somewhat customary conflict of interest statement. My wife is a teacher in Memorial Elementary School. Tonight on my agenda, we are not voting on anything that would constitute conflict of interest, but she is one of the presenters, and I just want to make that front.
Okay, great. That's fine. All right. Next on the agenda, we've got community comments. I don't see anybody here for community comments. Sam, anybody online? Raise their hand.
See, no hands raised.
No hands raised. All right. Excellent. So next up, we'll turn over to Dr. Cohn for superintendent and administrative comments.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm going to reiterate what you mentioned about the staff and thanking the staff. I'm really proud of the staff, students, custodians, teachers, nurses, food servers. Basically, it was an all call to make sure we were pitching in for our heat management protocols that we have and hopefully don't have to put into place very often, but it was challenging and I'm so appreciative. I wish you could have seen the teamwork that took place in a short amount of time over the course of the couple of days of targeting the hottest rooms. Yeah, basically just you're where the upper rooms and second floors, third floors facing the sun, especially in the afternoon, can be extremely hot, up to 85 to 90 degrees on some of these days. And the custodians were just excellent in opening windows in the morning, and we got all the water and refilled all through the buildings. We were fortunate, I know at MISCO, and I don't know if everyone knows, but at MISCO, we, in the last year, we've been waiting on approval from DEP for the, what is it, PFAS? Yeah, like I said it right. Okay, for the filtration system to be approved, and it just was about a little over a week ago. So we had the bubblers up and running. So we had probably triple amount of water that we normally have, but it still was hot, So we worked with the teachers and the nurses. There were a few students that weren't feeling great, and we monitored, but everyone did really well. In the notes, I just kind of gave you what I sent out for the heat management protocols, and we had some ideas that came up too of future things that maybe if there's some funding for additional fans or ceiling fans, or there are a few areas that we might want to look into for targeting that are the hottest parts of each of our buildings. But I want to thank everyone for that. I wanted to share that we were a grant recipient from a DESE cell phone grant. There were over 80 districts who applied for this grant, so we're fortunate to have been one of the few districts to have received funding. We received $11,450 for approaches to address student cell phone use, and it's a pilot grant. We know there's lots of new research coming out that the commissioner brought forward right at the end of the last school year to share about the new research on harmful effects of cell phones and what we're going to be doing with a committee, particularly at the high school. And they're looking at lots of different strategies, especially for working with anyone who needs help with managing cell phone use. But the phrase that when they did talk to all the students, I was at all the assemblies, was off and away. So in essence, they should be off and away in classrooms. In the past, just to give you a little history, in the past, before we were one-to-one entirely, before COVID, you had the ability to use that as a device. And once you had a device that, let's say it wasn't charged, and you could use it in the classroom. But with this time and with the new research we're trying, it has become, a distraction in a lot of schools, and a lot of schools are looking at making changes. So they have a committee working on how that's going to be working throughout the year, but we're pleased to be able to receive some funding from the state to support that work. Anyone have questions on that? Okay. And I just threw it in here, but wanted to let you know I put out an all-call for juniors and seniors students to see if they'd be interested in being our student reps to the school committee this year. Fallon Clark will be coming back this year. She was here last year, but then ended up having a conflict right in that spring, semester but I asked her if she wanted to come back, and she's interested. And we'll be coming back starting next meeting. And we've had at least 2 other students put in. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to extend that application into later on this week. But if one of you want to volunteer or to be on a little subcommittee to interview the candidates, basically Fallon said she'd be on it. Usually a principal from the school would be on it. I'm on it, and at least one school committee member. And the goal would be to be able to get those done in the next 2 weeks. And then at that first meeting for them would be the last meeting in September. Right. So you can just reach out to me after if you're interested. And then we probably would do a after school type of interview as a guest. That's what we've done in the past. That's all I had for some quick updates for you. So I'm going to ask Jay to come on up and talk about the budget closeout for FY23. It's okay.
Hi, everybody. How are we doing tonight? All right, I'll be pretty quick and brief. As you know, we closed out FY23's books. I believe you all got copied on the EMD certification, which came in exactly where I expected it would, which is a good thing. So that's in pretty good shape. But in general, I'll let Sam get that up and running. In general, EMD is basically looking at the general fund. They don't really look at the revolving funds other than that it's part of the balance sheet. But the bottom line, you go to some slides here. Revenue to expenditures, which is bottom line, that's what I'm looking at. We ended up with a very small surplus last year, a little under $350,000. That's good. I always say that I like to try to have 1% of the budget not spent at the end of the year. That's a little less than 1%, but that's about where it went. On the expenditure side, we only had about $5,000 left when it was all said and done as far as what we budgeted for expenditures and what we ended up with. The difference and the reason we had more was revenue. There were 3 areas that revenue exceeded what we anticipated. One area where it was below what we anticipated. Charter school reimbursement, which, as you know, changes during the course of the year. So they put a number on the cherry sheet for the changes. So we ended up getting about 37 less. But transportation, and this has been happening pretty routinely for the last 6 or 7 years. That last payment we get on June 30th, we ended up getting an extra $230,000. That's great because that's basically what helps us out. The vision program, as you know, we stopped that program in FY23, but we got a couple of payments in July and August from the previous year. So that was revenue that gets posted this year because that's when it came in. Medicaid, we did up the amount that we budgeted for Medicaid, but we ended up taking in $129,000 more than we budgeted. We budgeted $50,000 as a revenue source. So that's a good sign. And that seems to be a trend as well. More and more situations of, they are applied to Medicaid reimbursement. It's just about any student activity that families that are on Medicaid. So that's worked out well. And then the interest was up about $2,400. That's sometimes it can be up or down. Those are the main drivers that gave us revenue, that gave us that surplus in the budget. I also wanted to just highlight a couple of things. One is out-of-district tuition. As you know, Jen D'Angelo, who's the SPED director, has been working really hard on trying to bring students back into the district. She's been very successful at that. So you can see in all the three major out-of-district tuition placements, we ended up not spending the entire budgeted amount. It was a fairly small amount on the public schools, a little bit more on the private schools, and a small amount on the collaborative schools. But that's a good sign, because that's a trend that we're providing services in district as opposed to placing kids out of district. And she's done a really good job in her tenure here to try and bring students back. Kids have aged out, so that's something that I think is a good positive sign going to the future. Now, of course, that could all blow up in 2 weeks. But right now, we're going to go with this good positive thing. Some of the areas that I have concerns about and things that have impacted us last year, and I think are going to continue to impact us, are some of the facility stuff that we're going to hopefully address with the capital plan that we're going to start working on hopefully soon. The HVAC, the accounts are called building control systems, and it's basically HVAC control systems, the computer management systems, anything that involves the electronics of how these buildings work. All 4 buildings exceeded their budget. And so that's not a great sign. We did up the amount that we budgeted for this year based on what we knew was coming from last year, but it's an area of concern because continually there's things that just seem to be breaking down. A lot of this equipment is 25 years old. It's really outlived its life, so I think it's something we're going to have to address in the capital plan. So that's something to look at. The other area is general building maintenance. So that's everything else that's not the control systems. And you can see at NIPMUC, we exceeded it by quite a bit. Just lots of things are breaking down at the school, specifically because the school is one of the older ones, not counting this school, of course. So, things with problems with the elevators, problems with air conditioning units, problems with plumbing. We're having an issue right now at Cluck where the pipes are corroding because it's highly acidic water that's coming out of the well. So we're finding that, for example, we turned on all the water bubblers in Misco and Cluck. We had to start replacing all kinds of parts because they started leaking, drains were backed up, so that kind of stuff. So that's another area, and again, this all will be addressed, I believe, when we put together our capital plan, but these are areas of concern that I have as we sort of move forward. I wanted to give you a little historical where E&D is. So E&D obviously is similar to free cash. It's basically what we have left after it's all said and done. And you can see back when I started, which was in fiscal year 10, we were about 1.2 million in the hole. That's not a good place to be. We corrected that quite a bit in the first year, but you can see the progress as we go forward to where we're at about 1.8 million this year. Last year, we were a little bit higher. The reason it was higher last year is because we had what's called E-rate, which is a technology grant that Joe Lakeview does every year that we apply towards stuff. We took that money, we put it in an account because we financed the cost of the project. We were going to apply it each year. The Department of Revenue said, no, you can't do that. You have to put it and close it out to E&D. So that's why there was a little jump there here. We had hoped to offset costs by doing it. But again, I feel like we're in a good place with E&D. Now, when you see 1.8 million, that is already taken out $1 million that you appropriated for this year's budget. So that's something important to keep in mind as well. And then the last account is school choice, which is another revenue source to offset budget things. And we can again see the trend. You see a big dip in 18, and there was a little bit of dip in FY20. But beyond that, we are slowly building up that account as well. These are our reserve funds that we use in case we have emergencies. Again, we're applying some toward this year's budget, but every year at the end of the year, if we appropriate, say, 800,000, or I believe this year it was $1 million, if we don't need to do it because the budget is finished pretty strong, we keep it in this account because this is where I have flexibility to take care of other issues. And we offset it, it goes to E&D, and then it's a lot less flexible as far as using it in the future.
So Jason, safe to say, like, if you looked at the previous slide and looked at this side, if you had to put a fiscal year 24 year bar on, knowing everything we know right now, the E&D would be 800K.
No, it would be right now that 1.8 is already taken $1 million out.
So it's 2.
So it's actually 2.8.
Got it, because we're in fiscal year 23 right now.
Right. Okay. When they certify E&D, you first have to take and reserve out of your your undesignated fund balance, your appropriations, reserve for encumbrances, reserved for appropriation. So there are some things like we get bills in July and August that we have to pay in July and August, but for last year's bills. So the way DOI wants me to do this now is I have to reserve it out of ED, and then I reverse the journal entry so we go back in. This year it was only about 155,000, so that's not a big impact, mostly because we were closing our purchasing process like at the end of May, so that we can start getting these bills in. If you keep buying stuff all the way to the end of June, the bills don't come till August and sometimes September, and I have to close it out before then. And quite honestly, when you've only got 2 weeks left in school, I kind of feel like if you haven't bought it by now, you probably don't need it. You know, you don't want to spend each spree at the end of the year just to spend the money. That's not like how I like to feel. Is there any other questions? Yeah, this is just a very broad overview. You know, I can give you all kinds of other backup data if you want to have, you know, multi-level sheets and stuff like that, but this is the basic stuff.
So that school choice, that's a balance in some accounts. That's not like a.
It's a revolving account for school choice. We have to keep it outside the operational budget.
What is that money used for?
Every year we appropriate as part of the budget when you certify it, an amount that I usually use just for 4 accounts, and that's regular classroom teacher accounts. So you'll see a budgeted amount, and then I put a negative number in to bring down what we actually budget, because we know we're going to use school choice to cover the rest of the costs. But like I said, sometimes at the end of the year, if it's been a good year, you know, especially the pandemic years where we were really struggling to hire people, we were saving on transportation. We didn't need to hit school choice, which is why we've been able to build it up, because if I don't have to use it to offset an expense, I don't. You know, we plan on it, and if we have to, we do, but if we don't, we don't. If that makes any sense. So that's a separate revolving account. Circuit breaker is another one which I didn't put here. Circuit breaker is offsetting out of district tuition. The rules on that is whatever you get in 1 year, you can carry it over for 1 year, but you have to apply it next year. So that's what we do. So we appropriate and offset out of district tuition by whatever we got in FY23, we'll reduce FY24's expenses. So it's a fixed number that we know pretty much in advance. Anything else?
Questions? Okay. It's one of those things where you got tons of questions, but you don't know which ones to ask, so it begs closer examination.
Tons of questions, don't know what to ask. But, okay. That means I'm doing my job well or not.
Probably means you're doing it really well. So we just said that.
I had some conversations with the Department of Revenue this year. They were kind of doing a road tour, trying to put names with faces. So a couple of them came to meet with me, my rep, and then like her boss came. They were very positive on how we're doing things in the district. They asked a lot of questions. They told me about some experiences in other districts. But the end result was they left saying, you know, we like what you're doing things fine. We're using you as an example for other districts that are struggling with certain things, that what you're doing is the way we want it done. So I feel good about that, because I tend to believe if they tell you to do something, you should do it.
That's fantastic. Can you give us their names? We would love to, I would love to talk to them.
Yeah, one of them, I don't remember the name. My main contact, her name is Kim Pelliquin. That's her name. She's our rep.
Okay.
She's also the rep for Mendon, and she might even be the rep for Upton as well at this point. I want to say the other guy's name was Andrew Nelson, but I don't remember 100%. But yeah, they were very positive on everything. I take that as a good sign. That was before I certified, and I had some conversations as we were certified. But we got it done early this year, which is something I tried to get done so that we can focus on other things. Right now, I'm working on the end of the year report, which is due the end of this month. Once it's filed, I'll get you guys a copy of that as well. And that details every single dollar spent in every function code, every bill. It's all broken out. It's fairly elaborate, so it gives you a lot more details than this on the expenditure side.
Very good, thanks.
Okay.
It's good. Yeah, thanks, Jim.
And so I'm gonna call up Cheryl and Leah and Brianna.
Spin the wheel. Let's swap out the deck, Sam. Woohoo! As much as I love a good bar graph, I'm much more excited to talk about this tonight. So I'm delighted to have Leah Hagan and Brianna Zaleski here. They're our elementary reading specialists, and together, on behalf of a larger team that involves other teachers and administrators, we'd like to give you and community members a kind of overview of early literacy universal screening. Early literacy universal screening is not new to Mendon-Upton. It's something we've been doing for years with some of the same tools that we'll be using this year. But one thing that is new is that there's a recognition on the state's part that this is really something important that's good for all kids. And they wanted to put in place regulations that would allow and ensure that kids across the state received early literacy universal screening in every district, and that parents would have a chance to hear about those results. And so, Sam, if you could flip the slide. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what universal screening for early literacy is and why it's important, right? And also share a little bit about what those regulations say and how we as a district are going to continue to implement the screening that we do here and communicate with families about it. Okay. So in terms of, before you flip, Sam, sorry. And before we, move on, one thing that I just want to say is this is something, universal screening is for every student. It's very similar to what we do for screenings for health and have done for years and years, in the sense that students get checked for vision or their hearing and stuff like this. And this is something where we'll be able to use formative assessments that are already in place to be able to not only monitor progress for all students and how we're doing in the classroom, but also to be able to identify students who may be having difficulties with reading. So now I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Take it away.
Okay, so yeah, next slide.
Awesome.
Okay, so the guidelines say, first and foremost, that districts across Massachusetts will be assessing students' reading abilities from kindergarten through at least third grade and at least twice a year. For us, that will just depend on if a student is in kindergarten or not. Kindergarten, we will just do twice a year. Grades 1 through 3, we will do 3 times a year. Districts were given a prescribed list of approved screeners, and we already use DIBELS, which is the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. And that was one that meets all of their requirements. And that will be used multiple times throughout the year to assess the students' literacy abilities. Again, these are things that we've already been doing. Something that's somewhat new is more of the communication with families. So we will be informing parents and guardians about how their child did and what the results mean. And as well, we'll be communicating and establishing certain plans that will be put into place to address the needs of any students who end up requiring some additional support to fill some of those gaps.
Go to the next slide. So in addition to the things that Brianna mentioned, DESE has also provided a framework for us for what we can use for interventions and evidence-based practices that will support students with their reading. And this will support all students, but especially the students who are experiencing difficulties. They give some guidance for what we can do and how that can look in the schools.
And I'll just say before you guys continue, at the end of the deck, there are some resource links to some of the guidelines and stuff like that. So we're just going to provide kind of a high level overview, and you can really dig into it later if you want.
So how we implement, meaning we've already been doing this and we're going to continue to do it, is that we use the DIBELS. As I said, it's the 8th edition. And like I said, it was one of the top 3 that DESE stated meet all of their criteria for a screener. We will be doing the first screening in the fall. We'll start with grades 1 through 3 in just a few weeks. We'll give kindergarten a little more time to settle in before we do them, but they will be done in the fall. And we'll do another one in the spring for all grade levels, but we will do a third for some of the other grade levels. And in addition to the approved screener, we have a number of other resources and curriculum that we use within the district, such as Wonders, which is our reading comprehension. We have Foundations for phonics. iReady we use as a diagnostic, and that will give us additional data to support what we see in the DIBELS. But we also can use iReady for instruction. We have other things such as Lexia. So there's a lot of really great resources available to us and the teachers to support the students, whether they end up falling in that at-risk range or not. Students are all going to be getting access to these things.
So the major change this year that we have not done as much of in the past is the communication with families piece. We've always tended to communicate with some of the families, but not all of the families across the board in a systematic way. And so that's what we'll be doing this year for part of DESE's requirements. So a district newsletter will go out to families as well as the school newsletters at Clough and Memorial. We will have a website, thanks to Colleen, with some resources, with links to guidelines and research and some practical things that parents can use off of that website. And then most importantly, every family, like I said, is going to find out about this screener and how their students scored. And that will be done at conferences, hopefully in person, but if not, some families can't make it to conferences or whatever happens, those will be done by phone calls. And we feel like this is really important because it kind of helps us to connect with the families and really explain what this is and what it means, because we just want to, this is just part of a way to be on the same team for the student. And we just want to make sure that no parents are worried when they see a letter come home and think, what is this? What does this even mean? They'll already be expecting it and they'll already hopefully understand it. And they'll know who to ask if they have questions. So that's what we're kind of excited about, is looping the families in more this year.
So over the summer, we developed an action plan, something just really visual for staff, for you guys to understand really what all of this looks like in action. So tier 1, which is what the universal screening is everyone. Every single student will be seen. Every single student will receive the DIBELS screening 2 to 3 times a year. Every single student will be getting foundations from K through 2, as well as some support in foundations in grade 3. Wonders as a curriculum for ELA, and that's all just occurring in the general education classroom. Every single student gets that. Additionally, at both elementary schools, there are weekly grade level meetings that we use to look at data to drive instruction in the classroom. We attend those. We have administrators attend those. We have an instructional coach that works at Clough and MISCO that attends them as well. And we help the teachers work through these data inquiry cycles. So we're not kind of just blindly teaching, we're really teaching to what the students need based on what the data is showing us.
Oh yeah, oops, sorry, can you
Not
go
yet.
back? Sorry. Thank you. So when we do find out if that students are at risk based on these assessments, we have a few different things in place that we are already doing and some that we plan to do. We have child study meetings at both schools, and those are just designed to discuss a student that has needs that we want to gather a team for to make sure that we're able to provide the interventions that that specific student needs. And then an example of these are they may either receive pull-out services out of the classroom for a little bit of their day to address their reading needs. Sometimes it's some of the tutors and us will go into classrooms and just pull small groups. We'll work with teachers, different things like that, so that the students who have gotten the instruction and are showing us that they're still struggling will get what they need. And hopefully they will be able to either, not need it anymore, or we'll be able to get more information about it. So when we do our progress monitoring, again, the students who show that they kind of need more support will be also monitored more than just 2 to 3 times a year to show growth more specifically over a couple of weeks, so that we know what's working and what's not working, so that we can really pinpoint what the student needs. And along with all of this, we are in communication with the teachers really closely, and then teachers and us are in communication with the families, so that the families may have gotten this letter or this information, they know their student may need some additional support, and now we're also giving them updates along the way so that they know what's happening with the students' education. And then, do you want to go back to tier
Sure,
3?
I can do tier 3. So tier 3 is really the most intensive. Obviously, the child study team is going to come together again, review any data that's been collected to say, have the interventions been working? If not, why not? You know, what conclusions can we come to? What are our next steps? Possible next steps could be just more intervention, whether that's if they were previously getting inclusion in the classroom with a tutor or a reading specialist, maybe they're going to continue to get some inclusion, but now also we'll promote a couple times a week for really even like 1 or 2 with the teacher students for really intensive intervention. They all the while will continue to get the tier 1 instruction. They'll still be in the classroom for the main portion of the ELA curriculum. We'll continue to progress monitoring them and continue that communication with parents, but it's just going to be a lot more intensive and a lot more like personalized and one-on-one, possibly, if they end up needing that tier 3.
So I'll wrap up and we can flip to the resources so that folks see it. I'll wrap up and say, first of all, just like, I'm so delighted like at the work that this group has done. It was largely kind of pulled together over the summer, and I want everyone to know that, you know, there are resources in terms of staff professional learning that will be happening. There's a calendar of assessments. Both elementary schools have walked through it, and the services and the communications will be happening at the same time, so that we've kind of like done that together. And the work that these folks and the other folks on the team have done and continue to do, I think really will provide what the community needs to be able to connect and partner to help the kids continue to develop in this area.
Questions?
So I think this is great. I think the communication piece with families is something that's very welcome. And I just had a question about, what does this look like for our Spanish immersion students, both at the assessment level and for interventions?
That's a great question. And so I'll take that
okay.
because
I
this
can
has
jump
been
in
something
whenever.
that our group has actually been talking about too. So we will have them participate in the universal screener because it's universal and we want to be able to keep tabs on that. But just like any student who may, whose results may indicate some type of reading difficulty, it's just a screener. It's just a data point, right? And so what we'll be doing is working with staff to be able to say, okay, well, what else do we have to look at to identify if there's any difficulties here, so that we're not just relying on one data point. And also with Spanish immersion in particular, you're working with students that haven't been practicing that type of assessment. They've been working in a different language. And so that may require some different like ways of essentially approaching the question of, are there supports that need to happen here? So we're working on that actually, and we've reached out to other immersion districts to kind of learn what we can collectively. And also to DESE, they have some resources for English language learners. That isn't really the same thing, but that it kind of comes together in terms of a student's ability in one language or another with the assessments.
There is also, I'll jump in, it's not an official DESE approved dyslexia or like a universal screener type screener, but there is a Spanish version of the DIBELS that we've used in the past with the students usually K through 3, I believe. And it's very similar. Again, it won't meet the regulations, but we still are going to use it just to kind of keep track of their Spanish abilities as well as their English, because a lot of times they go hand in hand. So if we see them struggling in the Spanish, we can kind of dig deeper and see if they need more support in English, and they go hand in hand. So that has been a nice way to kind of check in on students who are not sure how much English or Spanish they know.
This is
So
also
we'll
one of the
continue.
reasons why the Dibbles was selected in this district as, you know, and we have iReady too, which also offers a Spanish version.
I have a curiosity question. I love that this is an initiative that's being undertaken. I think it helps us to catch some of these kiddos who kind of fly under the radar in terms of being struggling readers. I'm curious to know if there's any mechanism, any guidance coming from the state, or say kids who may be coming in from out of state at some of these later grades past our typical age of screening. So like say 4th, 5th, 6th. I work at a middle school with identification, and I know we're finding lots of kids who are coming in with some really basic reading deficiencies. And I'm just wondering if there's any sort of recommendations or programming or assessments that work to screen some of those kids who might be coming in the district with later grades.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Dibbles goes up until 8th grade, and iReady as well. I don't know if we utilize it up that high, but we certainly can continue, and we do still. I mean, we only go up to 4th grade at the elementary schools, but we do still use the Dibbles with our 4th graders, and they do take the iReady diagnostic. So we have a number of different data points to continue to monitor them, because the guidance does say at least 3rd grade. So certainly we would be continuing to keep an eye. You know, I met with the 4th grade team this week and said, these are the kiddos that were kind of receiving a little extra support last year. We're going to continue to keep an eye on them this year. I just want you to be aware that, you know, that will be happening. We're always going to be continuing to watch out even above 3rd grade.
The universal screening is through 3rd grade, but yeah, but we have the tools to be able, and we'll continue to do that for kids that need it.
I'll echo what these guys just said. I'm super excited about the communication piece. That's really awesome. Just more out of curiosity, I know we're here to talk about literacy, but is there a math equivalent of everything we just talked about?
Not currently.
I don't think
No.
so.
It's hard to have a universal screener for math because there's so many different skills. Some of them build upon each other. And yeah, it's
We do use iReady though,
unfortunately.
you know, so at least in relation to this, the standard that the grade levels, now you're able to use that as a screen. Yeah, not quite exactly the same, but.
And we do
it
still
gives us
provide
information to be able to
interventions.
target in our
Yeah.
data inquiry cycle.
We do still have, you know, our academic and Title I tutors would provide intervention in math if necessary. In fact, I would, you know, if necessary. My passion is literacy, but if that's what a kid needs, I'm gonna make it happen. So yeah, we keep an eye on that. Just there's not a universal screener beyond iReady.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, I think we can move on to new business. All right, back to you, Dr. Cohen.
All right. Now we're gonna have Mr. Brian Maloney come on up and tell us about the next Model UN field trip, which is out of state.
First of all, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Sam, I don't know if you got my share. So I think this is my 7th year running Model UN at Nipmuc. And we are planning, I've asked my club to like get me to the point where all I need to do is drive the bus. You tell me where to go, and we're getting there. Our students wanted to go to a college Model UN conference, and they, through discussion and trying to plan, a lot of them are DECA students, so they didn't want that to interfere later in 2024. And we found UConn has a Model UN conference on the weekend of November 3rd through the 5th. So this will be, I believe, Nipmuc's first college Model UN conference. As far as I know, if it was in the past, it must have been over 10 years. It's a weekend on the campus, Stores, Connecticut. The students put together, they figure it would cost about $170 per student. It's $60 for the club fee. It's $60 for delegate fee. The majority of the fees with hotel rooms, we can book forward to a hotel room. Now I have a hotel room pending only because we have about right now 10 students that are planning to attend, 2 chaperones, 1 male, 1 female. But that number could change. All of a sudden now we have a lot of students that really want to go as well. But they figured about 170. We have about 640 in our account. And we continue to do more fundraising to reduce the costs for this conference and of course in the future conference. We're still going to be doing the ones that like St. John's or maybe at Woodstock again in Connecticut. We don't have a favor towards Connecticut. It just these things happen to pop up, just to let you know. And the schedule, UConn hasn't formalized the schedule yet, but from my prior experience of going to Yale and UMass college conferences, usually the first night or the first day is Friday, and they'll have a welcome ceremony. They have a guest speaker. Saturday is afternoon and morning, all committees, and then Saturday night would be some kind of activity, a guest performer, they might have a dance, I'm not sure. And then Sunday would be the final ending committee with awards. Some of our students have done pretty well in the past. We've been getting, a few best delegate awards. Our president, Leanna Miller, received one at the Woodstock Academy this past spring. And these are some of the committees that they're looking to have. In the General Assembly, that's our largest committee. The largest number of people attend. It could be anything with trade with China, economic crisis caused by Ukrainian war. And as you can see, as it goes further down, and if you just want to kind of scroll down, sorry. We'll have other committees where they're dealing with advancing maternal and child health in developing regions, political prisoners, conflict minerals, and then towards the bottom where it's for more experienced delegates, cabinet crisis committee. Usually they pick a president and they have a crisis surrounding that administration, historical crisis, and this one is dealing with the Signoria of Florence, which was it was the Woolen Guild uprising in Florence in about the 1300s. And then the ad hoc is a mystery crisis. That could be anything. In my experience in the past, some of those committee members have been pulled out of the hotel room at 1 a.m. It's usually really fun, exciting. Every student wants that one, So I was hoping with your permission that we would be allowed to travel down to UConn for that weekend. If you have any questions, just let
I
me
just
know.
wondered if anybody has any proposals so far, or is that going to be done as we move toward the conference?
What do you mean?
For any of the committees that you've got them going to, do they have any motions they want to bring in front of the committees?
I'm not sure. We're ready to book this, and we were waiting for approval before we start submitting stuff. I didn't really want to jump the gun just yet, But I don't know if I mentioned it. I've had one student who has done our Nipmuc Model UN. He currently attends Seton Hall, and he enjoyed it. He actually is part of the Seton Hall Model UN down there. So, we do have students that go on to do other things.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the trip for UConn Model UN.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
All right, thank you very much.
for coming.
I appreciate it.
All right. It's always, I cannot have him come and talk about Model UN without me saying the story about how I was a Model NPP advisor. And we went to UConn too, so we loved it. So I'm always, every time you say it every year, I'm jealous, so maybe I should be a chaperone one day, but it's pretty amazing stuff. All right, and maybe next year I won't have to say that. But every year I say that. I'm gonna jump into the district action plan. So I don't know if you can pull that up, please, Sam. As you know, we've been talking about this for quite some time. You have the fancy booklets for the 5-year plan in front of you. I did share it digitally and we talked about how on the PD day, we rolled that out to all of the staff. So they have that and started to become familiar with the 5-year plan. And so we've been pretty systematic in how we're rolling this out. We finished that. Then at the last meeting, I highlighted the initiatives that we've identified for this school year, our priorities, kind of like the sub priorities, or the priorities. And so what I'm going to be talking about tonight is some of the action steps and focus areas that we'll be working on. Now, I didn't count in our spreadsheet how many pages, if we printed it, I didn't print it, but how much information is in that spreadsheet that we shared with you. We used a slightly different model for planning. It's called the logic model. And we have more details in our plans than we've had in the past. So you have that in your packet. I didn't make extra copies for that. And I'm not going to go in depth on every aspect of that entire plan tonight. What I'm going to do is just point out some key focus areas.
Are you sure?
Yes. When I get too excited about an area, you can wave your hand.
We got it.
You got it? Because you know I do that. I get going and then next thing I know, 10 minutes pass and I'm still on number 2. So I do get into it. But you have all of those details in there. You know me well. All right. So if you go to the next slide, please. I always want to begin with our mission that we empower all learners to thrive. You can keep going. Next one. Let me make this so I can see this here too. And as we talked about at the last couple of meetings, our theory of action for our entire plan. And I think it's just the sense that it's a 5-year plan. And then we have annual action plans each year to move us through those 5 years. And sometimes we'll be done with something in that first year. Sometimes it may not even quite get through. We're continuing some of the action steps from the last plan, or even some from the beginning in the plan before that, right? Because some things do take time, but just to let you know, this is kind of the framework that we're working underneath. Great, next slide. Just as a reminder, in the past, we call these objectives. We're calling them strategic priorities. That seems to make a lot of sense for people as well. We have the 4 areas: the deeper learning, high quality curriculum instruction, equity, inclusion, and well-being and community support. And what I'm going to be talking about is each of the priorities that we're focused on this year as we go through. If you go to the next slide, what we started with is a general goal for each of those 4 areas. So this is our deeper learning goal, where we're kind of encapsulating all of the work that we're going to be doing to develop a plan which will expand the deeper authentic learning practices at all levels. It will be highlighted through showcases of learning to authentic audiences. We're still working on connecting back to our portrait of a learner. And we also are including in there this year, focus on our schedule. We've had a lot of feedback lately on how our schedules at different schools are hindering some of the progress and work that we want to do. So that's one of the priorities that we're bringing into this year's conversations. When I presented the overarching, all of our sub priorities for the 5 years, what I told you verbally last time, I don't know if I gave it to you here, everything that's highlighted, those are our top 3 priority areas that we'll be focused on in this plan. So if you're a visual person like me, maybe this is helpful for you. We're going to keep going. All right, so this is where all the text is, and I know that's too much text on a screen, but it was the best way that I could kind of have it up there for you. So in those 3 priorities that we have, each of the columns below it are the action steps that I pulled from the giant plan that you have, in paper form or, digital form. So some of the key areas for our deeper and authentic learning, we're going to be continuing our expansion of deeper authentic learning experiences in the classrooms. So that's when you hear us talk about, we're members of the Applied Learning Institute, and we're getting trained and piloting some lessons there. That's when you hear us talk about the what's it called, school PBL, School Leadership Network that we're in like the second year of at the middle school. When we talk about Project Lead the Way, which is problem-based learning, innovative pathways, all of those, that's what we're talking about, expanding it across all of our grade levels. One thing we figured out, we need to really come up with a shared definition because it all falls underneath deeper learning. And that's a real push from the commissioner and the state. But sometimes we say it's authentic learning. Sometimes we say it's applied learning and inquiry-based. And those are all strategies that fall underneath deeper learning. So what we're going to do to try to communicate better broadly with all of the stakeholders is to have some shared definitions. So then when we're talking about it, if it's new lingo for people to be able to understand a little bit better. Obviously, we're going to continue to provide the PD around PBL. You've heard a lot last year about the computer science career innovation pathway. And our intent is not to just have that one innovation pathway at high school, is to expand to another one. So this is our first launch in the last couple of years with that. And we're continuing to have grant funding to support it, but we are also going to be looking at other pathways as well. I think probably the inspired learning days have probably been in our plan for years. They're still not where we want them to be. They keep getting better every year. We had a lot of movement in connecting back to Portrait of a Learner competencies last year. And you had students talking about it as becoming part of our culture. There's still work to be done. And so that's why we're keeping it in there to stay, laser focused on that. And we're always trying to work on our external partnerships. I ran out of room on the slide. We have a lot of examples of our partnerships. I already mentioned the applied learning, the PBL works, Mass STEM Hub. We are always reaching out for more partners. So that's all around the instructional practices of deeper authentic learning. Another area that you've heard us talk about are the showcases of learning is kind of the, what we've talked about. And we've really seen a lot of progress in the last couple of years where every department, let's say at NITMUC, has a showcase of learning. So you have the civics symposium and science, and so you can see, or if many of you are parents of high schoolers, you've been at some of those. And we also have some at the middle school, right? But we don't have it in every single discipline or every single grade as broadly as we'd like. And we think that working with project-based learning, some of those we might be able to expand more authentic audiences even more and kind of have a more of a system of showcases of learning. So we're going to look to see how we can expand that at other levels as well. Let's see. One piece that we started to work on last year, and we're continuing because it really was just a pilot, was about students being able to self-assess their learning in relationship to the Portrait of a Learner competencies. So at one point we had them, maybe do Flipgrid, and they had little videos and they talk about, what kind of competency they used. Another time we tried out Thrively, and they had reflections in our Thrively platform. Ultimately, we want it to be embedded in all of our practice, but we've been very strategic about trying some of that. I think that's, let's see, make sure I have, and at the top, I didn't mention this, we feel we need to develop a firm implementation plan for the next 3 years. So it's kind of like a plan to create a plan. But we talked about it, but we haven't done it yet. And we really feel that now we're at a place where we can say, how do we really want to see Portrait of Learner competencies roll out across the whole district now that people are familiar with it? And we're hoping to make some progress with that. So we put that in to make sure we focused in on it. And then we get to the schedules. This is pretty straightforward in order. We're going to form committees at each of the schools. We're going to establish priorities in those committees. We're going to engage in cross-district collaboration. So you could have the scheduling committee at the middle school talking to the scheduling committee at the high school. Because right now we have rotating schedules at the middle and high school, but they're totally different rotating schedules. So we can never share staff between the two schools. And if we could, or if there's a way we can figure that out, that would work for everyone and everything, then there's a lot more possibilities that we can do with staffing and resources, or even having high schoolers come down to the middle school and all of that. So that's an opportunity. But it also comes down to, we've been assessing at the middle school, like developing a win block, and you've heard about that. But we're still trying to make progress of making that better. Same thing at the high school. And that the elementary, they're always looking, it's a little bit more flexible in how we design our elementary schedules, but still, there's work to be done in how we can incorporate different aspects into our schedules. And so broadly, if we're going to bring in, let's say at the high school, more internships, sometimes a technical issue of a schedule can actually be a huge obstacle for sending students out at certain times of the year. Trying to think of other things that have come up. And that there are other technical issues that come up with schedules. We go, oh, we thought that worked well with the schedule at the middle school when we negotiated last time, then we realized this isn't quite working out the way we thought it would, and we'll bring some of those up as well. It might be ambitious for us to say by the end of this year, we'd be able to have new schedules, but I know, if we can for next year, that'd be great. Otherwise, we're going to make a lot of progress and hopefully have a lot of really helpful conversations. Goal number 2. So we're focused on high quality curriculum and instruction and build skills that enable a collaborative approach using data to inform adjustments to practice, improve our ability to support, monitor student progress. This one, I mean, I guess it makes sense that we have 4 priorities highlighted. To be honest, in many ways, a lot of the priorities, we're still doing some aspects of all the priorities, but this is our focus areas. So it's just because we don't have something highlighted, we're still doing work in some of those areas. But we have 4, it's teaching and learning, and so that's why we have 4 there. So I had to break them up onto 2 pages. You've already started to hear about some of our work with our data systems and our data inquiry cycles. So under data systems, one thing we've talked about tonight, the early literacy screeners and communicating to families. So you can see how we're launching that as well. We also have been working with Open Architect. I think we talked a little bit about that. That falls within, that's one of the systems that helps to support our work that would fall in our area right here as well. But something that they talked about is, what are strengths of our students? What are areas for growth? And we're just going to be systematically going through this process that Charles laid out for us. Curriculum's always going to be part of the core of what we do as educators, but there also are areas that we target for improvement because of a review that we did the previous year, or we're looking at standards from a previous year, or maybe there are new curriculum materials. And so what we have in here, you'll see a mixture of some of the focus areas that we wanted to at least highlight for you. I know we didn't talk a ton about curriculum last year, but it's always taking place, so we really wanted to highlight that, particularly at the elementary level. With both of our principals, they've been really focused on writing and also creating a scope and sequence of new line and pacing guides around writing, you've heard a lot about reading, but writing is definitely an area that we know if you look at any data, and I mean, this is kind of everywhere, but that we need to improve. So we've been working on that. We also have been working for the last number of years at the middle school and looking at data and trying to revise our scope and sequence and vertical articulation that's taking place in ELA as well. Prior to COVID, we had a 5-year schedule review. For those of you who were here, we made it. We did a social studies one. I don't know if you remember doing that, but we did that, a district social studies review. We had a wellness review, and then COVID hit. And so we had a cycle. We started it, and we started in that COVID year ELA. And so that's why that's our focus now, because we're kind of continuing from COVID from the ELA work that we did before. What we're going to do is create a new cycle, look at where we're at, and then basically identify what those focus areas for review each year. Other areas too would be, let's see, I think I hit all of that curriculum. All right, did you move me on? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, common assessments. Next slide. Yeah, go back to the one right before. Yep. And all right, so the remaining 2 are common assessments. You can't analyze data if you don't have that assessment data. In some cases, we have common assessments in a grade level and subject areas, and some places we don't. You would have teachers using different assessments. So the goal is to have more departmental grade level assessments. It would be embedded in their assessment calendars like we have the district one, and we'd be able to improve our work there. continue to examine student work and also review the formative assessments that we have there. So you'll hear some more. We haven't talked about assessments in a few years in particular from the building level. So that would be new work for us in talking about. I know you're going to hear a lot about instructional coaching. I know you heard a little bit about it, I think, at the end of last year, but we are, under Cheryl's leadership, really working on teachers being trained, you know, with some stipends from some of these grants to be instructional coaches and targeting some of the areas and working with their colleagues. So it would be on top of, you know, what they're doing in their teaching loads. It's not a separate, like, an added instructional coach, but we're trying a different model to see if we can expand the capacity of our instructional leadership.
Is there a lot of interest in that?
Yeah.
Good.
Do you know how many? 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a career.
Yeah. Yeah. So
The way to differentiate.
So you'll definitely hear a lot about that this year. We've already started it, put it out. We have people who are interested. I know we've talked about in the past the mentoring induction for paraprofessionals, ABAs. We're launching that this year. You'll hear about it later on in the year to see what kind of improvements and impact that has had. We're still looking at supporting co-teaching. We have a lot of new teachers who haven't been trained in co-teaching. So that's a continuous cycle that really, I don't know if it ever goes away, but we try to bring in external support with different grants that we've received from the state that we've been fortunate to have. I think that was it for that one. So you can keep going. I'm going to pause before I get to strategy 3. Because I just talked a lot at you. So this is like- So that we'll pause before I get to 3 and 4.
I'm switching between your materials so that I keep my interests alive.
All right, that's good.
So one question I have, as I always have, is the good old column of people responsible line has the same people in it from all.
Yeah.
Is that going to be manageable? I mean, all of these things are this is a lot of stuff
Yeah.
already. We haven't even gotten to the strategic.
Oh, yeah,
strategic
sorry.
goals.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think because a lot of this, we're putting it in, we tend to put the district superintendent, assistant superintendent, district leadership team, and then like principals, right? Because you need leaders for a lot of this. What maybe we'll go back, because also part of this is like, if you give some feedback, we can kind of specify in the actual document. We've looked at the documents a lot, so we're always welcome feedback, but you know, it is teachers, it's teacher leaders. We try to kind of focus who's the lead on some of it. But you're right. We, as much as we try to narrow our focus, no matter what, since I've been here, it's my 11th year now. And we do, because there's more we could be focused on, but it's always a lot to be done, you know. And we will, at the end of the year, the end of the 5 years, we will not complete everything as we intended in the beginning, but I'd rather aim high and have us move step by step and grow and at least hit, you know, 2/3 of it, because then we have that movement than to leave things off and not kind of address some areas that we know we've identified. So it's tough, yeah.
It's just my impression. I have no evidence for this.
Yeah.
At all. It's just my
No, you're
feeling
right, you're right.
That you guys are going much deeper than you've gone in the past. in some of
Yes.
these topics.
We're
So
trying.
you've narrowed the focus and
Yeah.
gone deeper.
Yeah.
So it's,
We'll let you know how that works
it
out.
used to be broader, now it's narrower and deeper. So you're using
Yeah.
the same amount of workload.
And what's great is when we have new staff who come on board from other districts, hi back there. Sometimes you hear, I've never seen it so detailed like this.
Yeah.
So some districts, they don't do this. And it's not that it's a right or wrong, right? Some districts will say, in general, here are the core areas we're working on. What we try to do is to get specific, to keep us focused and accountable to ourselves. But in doing so, there's probably too many details, or we won't be able to hit every one of those, but at least it helps move us and holds us a little bit accountable. When we meet throughout the year as a team, you know, we have check-ins, we see our progress, and sometimes we have to completely abandon something because we say, I don't know, every year we say, I don't know why we thought we could do that. And then because we get focused in another area.
Or you might just,
Yeah.
you might obviate the need for it.
Right,
'cause you've
that's
just
true.
gone around.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing too.
But it's definitely a great point. Any other comments before I keep going?
And I think it can be kind of a moving target, right? You're gonna reevaluate every year. If something was 5 years out and a year later it's still 5 years out,
Yeah.
that's, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's just a constant kind of development. Right?
And what I like about, these aren't firm documents so much in the sense of it's a paper copy. That's pretty firm, right? We just, printed lots of copies. If something comes up, we want to move a deadline because we thought I don't know why we said October 1st. We can change it, adjust it. We give you updates. We come through and say, these are the work that we've done towards it. So you have a sense of our work. So that's the goal for it. So it's a little bit
Well, it's nice to have a
flexible too.
blueprint too. It's kind of
Yeah.
like before, so
Yeah.
it's cool.
What I liked, the part that I added in was the reasoning. Just, I don't have it in the presentation, but if we do this, some are obvious, but others are like, it made you really think about why we're doing what we're doing. I don't know, I just like that piece of it, of the logic model. We hadn't done before.
Well, still one coming out, it goes in the first section from the showcases.
Yeah.
I think that's just really, really great. Right?
Yeah.
I think every parent's perspective is always going to be a little different depending where your kids fall along the way. But it feels like there were a handful of showcases that existed pre-COVID that didn't come back after COVID. And that would be good to get those back. I think even related to where you started tonight's meeting with the cell phone thing, right?
Yeah.
Kids need to learn how to communicate. I think sometimes even the showcases where you have set up in the gym, the auditorium, parents walk around, they ask questions, gets them out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And anyways, that one really resonated.
Yeah,
I look forward to.
And to that point of the ones that we won't mention them, but like the ones that were before and maybe didn't come back for different reasons probably. But one thing is also creating, sometimes it used to be, we're learning more about project-based learning too. And it's not just a dessert, they say like, what's the thing? It's not like a dessert project at the end where you have just something that you crafted something and here you go. It's about the learning. And so some of the, we would have showcases, but I think we could go deeper and make them better. Yeah. And so I think some have been abandoned that maybe weren't as deep. And we're also looking for new ones moving forward, under new leadership here too. And, to say like, what else can we do that we haven't thought of yet and just making it better too. So that was some of the conversations that have come up.
And it's not just the reasoning column. There is an attempt. I'm just reading through these, the intended results, 2 columns of intended results. So not just the accomplishment or what the artifact will be as a result, but also an attempt to measure whether you achieve. I like
now whether or not we could actually measure every single one of those steps. I didn't want to leave any blanks in there, but yeah, in going through, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if we could actually do all of those. But in essence, for the whole group, when we really start to think about what are those outcomes, how can we measure it?
Yeah.
We know we have to keep getting better.
No, it's really
we talked about that.
Really good.
All right, I'm gonna keep going. All right, so equity, inclusion, and well-being. So enhance the district's multi-tiered systems of support with embedded culturally proficient instruction, social emotional learning curriculum, and a strengths-based approach to supporting all learners. So those are the 3 categories. When you go to the next slide, you can see them. They, for the most part, when we structured these in strategic planning, they are in order by priorities that the groups of people in those meetings set. And then we have like 2 other iterations of order. Doesn't mean we go in order each year, because sometimes we had to tackle something later because we knew we were working on it, but you can see we're focusing on those top ones there. So to go to the next page, this is just really the 3.1 and culturally responsive and inclusive practices is really continuing the work that we've done with our EDI committee, the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee work of the last couple of years. We've done some audit. Every year we do a little bit of an audit. Rather than paying $30,000 to have an external audit come in, every year we focus on an area and kind of audit it ourselves and then try to see what we can make improvements. So one area this year would be, around our school physical environments, and we're adding in belonging. We hadn't talked about belonging before, so belonging is a big focus. You'll see it starting to come up. It takes a long time to get to belonging when you're doing all the work of equity, inclusion, diversity, and belonging. It's kind of at the end, but I don't want to wait. So we're gonna start learning about it now and hopefully making some improvements and, you know, and that's for everybody. That's for all members of our community. One thing that we learned about last year was the equity pause protocol. That's something that when you have decision-making, it's something we could even do here at any point, you know, for making a big decision, and then you take a step back, you pause and you look through equity lens. And you go, huh, does that impact everyone, that decision? You know, who are we leaving out? And so we are trying to incorporate that. We practiced a little bit with some decision making last year, and we're going to continue to do that and continue to build the practices of our teachers. Again, student strengths, this shouldn't be too different from what you started to hear about last year. We started to talk about strengths, interests, passions of our students. That's still a big focus for us and how we can incorporate that and support our students and get to know our students a little bit better. We're going to try some things out there. We've heard a little bit about S3 last year. We continue with that partnership this year, and we'll be rolling out more of those whole student reviews. And what we're going to try to incorporate into our, you've heard about our RTI teams, SST, child study, in those teams as well to really be strength based and focus on our student strengths. And so that's one category we're focusing on this year. And then finally, there are kind of two main elements in the SEL category, which is social emotional learning, if you're not familiar with that. We have new Massachusetts health and physical education standards that have been under review and are coming out. And we're very fortunate to have added that wellness teacher at the middle school. And we also have health classes rolling out at the high school. So with the combination of that, now we have new standards to pilot, to work through, to write new curriculum. It's going to take time, but this year that'll be part of the work that they're doing. So I wanted to make sure it was in there. And also we piloted different SEL modules at various levels. We still do not have a coherent vertical programming in place. So that's continued work for us to, and that's really a priority for me, to make sure that we know a student coming through, it's, you know, comprehensive skills are building either through our own classes or through our wellness classes that we're offering. And so we continue to work on that. I think the fact that we've focused now on what I need type of blocks and more structures that we've added in, that's going to help facilitate some of that. And the last one, this is where some of you are going to get excited. Strategic goal number 4, improve district financial planning, security, and communications to the community through capital planning, expanded communication approaches, and revised crisis protocols. So you have the 3 main categories here. We received that facilities assessment back in April. We were hoping we'd get it a little bit earlier, and therefore we couldn't really get that capital planning launched. But that is the focus this year. The benefit of waiting until this year is that we have other assessments that we're going to incorporate in it, and I'll talk about that in a second. We continue with branding and messaging we'll talk about, and also a big focus. I've been working on crisis protocols, and I know we're going to have continued work this year. So we, even though that's a 4.7, I know that's work we're doing and wanted to include it. So we go to the next one with the action steps. It kind of goes in order, but basically pretty soon we're setting up the first meeting. We're going to go through the facilities assessment in one of the meetings. We've had a safety and security assessment done in the spring. And so we'll bring some of the highlights of that are relevant to capital planning. We've been working with MUCP. They have facilities assessments, not facilities, sorry, field assessments. I'd like that to be presented. We also have ongoing, we're planning for the long-term technology infrastructure needs that are always coming. That will be a presentation with that. And we also have some replaced wired networks and work that we're doing just that are capital needs. We just put them in there so you're aware of that. But that's a lot of our focus areas for capital planning. And then for communications, we are looking to embed e-collection of forms. We didn't quite get it up and running with PowerSchool to start this year. So now we have time. We're going to work through it this year and get it right and not rush it. And then be able to have, when you're registering at the beginning of the year or updating your demographics, that'll all be done in PowerSchool and in our student information system. I think we've already mentioned we're trying to improve our video and sound quality in here.
Check.
Yeah, we have this, but this isn't even it.
All right.
Yeah, this is like plan B or something, right? We have external people coming in who will be doing greater assessments for in here. I always try to improve our communications with Aptigee, which is our website. Thrill shares when we push out information, working on branding, just, what's the next level of branding of the district for consistency and colors and communications. And so one thing I developed a document for the external communications with the district leadership team. We're going to try that out to make sure now that we've figured out kind of what good patterns are for communications and improve in a few areas there. And you have the whole school sign out at Netmuck. I know Memorial PTO is eager to get one up and running there. My next goal really is MISCO, because you can't even read the sign that's there. But that isn't in our budget yet, right? And we need to partner, but what I'd like to do is have us get all that information for that, because that's really going to help with that external communications, just in a different way when everyone's driving by, and the branding of, having MU and having it consistent, and, hopefully sign bylaws, and then we'll be able to do it, but we're going to work on that. And then
Expectations for communications is extremely important. That's excellent.
Yeah. And we'll keep adapting it, but at least we've, taken a year or so to kind of figure out what seems to be working and try to keep improving that. So thank you. Last one, safety and security. Last year I worked with SROs. We have a draft crisis protocol document for the district. It's hundreds of pages long, the draft. We haven't gone through it. We've compiled all the information. It's a good starting resource of best practices. We need to go through it. We need to update it, revise it, and then have that trickle down to standard practices at each of the schools. I don't want anyone to think we don't have crisis protocols at the schools. We have kind of school-based protocols. What we want to do is have more consistency, and that's something that work, and be prepared for everything that could possibly come up, like say heat and hurricanes and whatever. I don't want to list anything else off. We did get the security assessments, what we haven't done yet. So there's always crossover that'll show up in the capital planning, but also that shows up here. There are things that aren't capital needs that we can still address related to that assessment and make some improvements in all the buildings. And just from a student level, we shared out new threat assessment protocols at all the school buildings. So there are resources and documents that if incidents come up that we have in place that they can use. What we need to do is, as needed, or new staff provide trainings and go through them, but we have the document and we're kind of working towards that to make some improvements in those areas too. And that concludes, as fast as I'm capable, overview, because I do get excited about what we're doing and I can go on and on. But I don't know if you have any key questions.
Ask unrelated ones related to safety. Did we ever get an update from MassDOT about the speed signs in front of Netmuck and this one?
I know we,
They're really selling the list, so they're definitely there on Netmuck, on both sides of the street.
are they out there? Okay.
There's one just if you're coming from Mendon-Upton, there's
Yeah.
one just
Yes.
before you get
Okay.
to the right. Just after
I
you
haven't
cross
seen the Mendon one, though. You're right. I haven't seen the Mendon, but I know we got it, but I don't.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
feel like-
before BET.
Yeah.
I feel like Steve Cinco, I feel like he talked about it, but I could ask him on the
Yeah.
timeline for it.
Yeah, it's not in this group yet.
No. So, but yeah, it's in the works, and we're also been talking to what's it called, Safe Routes to School, where they can do additional assessments for safety and mapping and improving, pick up, drop off, and those are things that we always review every year.
So what's the schedule for reviewing the progress?
So we'll here, like a school committee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
school.
typically we will come back mid-year, usually around January-ish, if I look at what I have in my calendar of when I plan things out, and then we come back at the end of the year. But in the meantime, the goal is that, we just already gave you a little progress right tonight on one of them. The goal is that every meeting, you're going to be hearing aspects about this as throughout the entire year, now that we have our focus areas. You won't hear it all, but you'll get some of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Well done.
So you just need a vote if you're interested in approving it for this year.
Make a motion to approve the action plan for the school district improvements.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's great. Thank you. All right, are we on to the school committee subcommittees? How do you want to start? Do you want to take it or want me to just kind of read through it?
I
or-
mean, basically, I sent out on Saturday proposed dates, looking at my calendar, wanted to bring it up tonight. So if there was something that was a conflict, then you could, let me know and we can try to work on it after, just because I want to make sure we get it in our calendars and up and running for the different subcommittees. So that's all. So you have all that there.
I just want to mention again, I'm probably going to show up to one that I'm not actually assigned to.
Breaking the rules.
Yeah, well, it's not breaking.
You just
I
can't
know.
vote. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Do you want to trade or something?
No,
Some of the audience.
No, I think it's appropriate. It's just,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I can't make the first budget subcommittee. I can send you on the side. I'll be traveling the week of this week tonight.
Okay. It's usually an organizational meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, it
and that
is usually
person-
assigned.
Okay.
So that's, it's all the roles then.
Well, you two can argue. One's president, one's those stickers.
No, Usually the person who's not present gets all.
Right.
Usually the note taker role.
I know. That's what he wants, exactly. All right.
Regarding the capital plan, I have a hard conflict on Wednesdays.
Okay.
So
On Wednesdays you do? Okay. Can you maybe send me an email after too? Thank you.
All right. So I guess if there's any other date conflicts, I can send out a comment.
Yeah.
All right. Other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting. We don't have any correspondence tonight. And future agenda items, we got the innovative learning and technology updates, introduction of new school committees to reps, and then human resource update. If there's nothing else, take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:22.